You are closer than you think to everything you want. And the uncomfortable truth is that if this sentence irritates you, confuses you, or sounds naive, that reaction is exactly the reason nothing has changed yet. Most people believe distance is the problem. Distance in time, distance in money, distance in opportunity, distance in confidence, distance in luck. They assume what they want lies somewhere far ahead, behind effort, behind struggle, behind fixing themselves, behind becoming someone else. And as long as you believe what you want is far away, your entire inner life organizes itself around waiting, chasing, and postponing. This is not a motivational issue. It is a perception issue. You are not stuck because you are incapable. You are stuck because you are oriented in the wrong direction. Here is what almost no one tells you directly. Wanting something intensely does not move you closer to it. Trying harder does not automatically bring it nearer. Thinking about it all day does not shorten the distance. In many cases, these behaviors quietly reinforce the gap. When you live in a constant state of wanting, you train yourself to experience absence. When your inner dialogue revolves around someday, soon, almost, not yet, you keep your nervous system tuned to lack. This is not punishment. It is cause and effect. Your inner world is always practicing something, and whatever it practices becomes familiar. Familiar becomes normal. Normal becomes your experience. The reason this video matters is not because you need another technique or another mindset trick. It matters because most people have been taught to approach life backwards. They are taught to chase outcomes instead of stabilized states. They are taught to push for change instead of embodying it. They are taught to fix the surface instead of correcting the root orientation underneath everything. You do not manifest from desire. You manifest from identity. You do not attract from effort. You attract from expectation. And expectation is not something you force. It is something you settle into. Right now, whether you realize it or not, you are very practiced at being who you are. You are practiced at the tone of your thoughts, the emotional baseline you return to, the assumptions you carry into conversations, the way you interpret delays, silence, resistance, or uncertainty. This practice is what creates momentum in your life, not motivation, not willpower, momentum. And momentum does not care about your intentions. It responds to repetition. The same internal reactions repeated daily become your personal gravity. This is why people can watch hundreds of videos, read dozens of books, repeat affirmations, visualize clearly, and still feel like nothing moves. They are attempting to add new ideas on top of an unchanged inner posture. It is like rearranging furniture in a house that is built on a slant. No matter how beautiful the setup, everything keeps sliding back to the same corner. The work is not in adding more content to your mind. The work is in shifting the angle at which you are living. Here is a confronting question that matters more than it sounds. What do you expect to happen for you? Not what do you hope for, but what do you quietly expect? Expectation reveals itself in your patience level, your emotional reactions, your ability to stay calm when nothing seems to be happening. Expectation shows up in how quickly you become discouraged, how often you second-guess yourself, how easily you interpret neutral events as signs of failure. Hope reaches upward. Expectation settles downward into the body, and the body always wins. If you listen closely to yourself throughout the day, you will hear the story you are living inside. It shows up in phrases like, "This is taking too long, this never works for me. I always have to struggle, maybe it is not meant for me. Others get it easier. Something must be wrong." These are not dramatic statements, they are quiet agreements. And whatever you agree with internally becomes the frame through which life responds to you. Being closer than you think does not mean your desire is about to drop into your lap. It means the shift required is smaller than you have been conditioned to believe. It means the barrier is not external complexity, but internal misalignment. It means you are not missing information, luck, timing, or worthiness. You are misplacing your attention and reinforcing an identity that cannot receive what it claims to want. As this unfolds, the goal is not to convince you of anything. The goal is to interrupt the automatic patterns you have been rehearsing without awareness. Awareness changes everything. Because what you see clearly, you stop feeding unconsciously. You do not need to fight your old habits. You need to outgrow them. And growth happens when perception shifts. This is where things begin to soften. Not because life suddenly becomes easy, but because your relationship to it changes. When your orientation changes, effort decreases. When effort decreases, resistance loosens. When resistance loosens, movement feels natural instead of forced. You stop trying to push the river and start adjusting how you stand in it. You're closer than you think. Not because the universe owes you anything, but because you have been standing at the doorway while insisting the house is far away. The door does not open through strain. It opens through recognition. And recognition begins the moment you stop chasing and start noticing what state you are practicing every single day. Stay with this, not to be entertained, but to see yourself more clearly than you ever have before. The rest will unfold naturally. If you are willing to stay honest with yourself, the next layer becomes impossible to ignore. Your life is not responding to what you say you want. It is responding to what you consistently assume is true about yourself and about reality. Assumptions are not loud. They are not affirmations. They are the quiet conclusions you have reached after years of experience, repetition, disappointment, and interpretation. They sit beneath your conscious thoughts and shape how you move through the world without asking for permission. You do not wake up each morning and declare them, but you act from them all day long. An assumption is not something you argue with life about. It is something you live from. When someone assumes things work out for them, they behave differently without trying. They are calmer in uncertainty. They interpret delays as neutral instead of threatening. They stay open instead of tightening emotionally. On the other hand, when someone assumes things rarely work out, their body prepares for disappointment before anything even happens. They rush, they overthink, they brace themselves. They look for confirmation of failure everywhere, not because they are pessimistic, but because their system is trained to expect loss. This is where many people unknowingly sabotage themselves. They try to change outcomes without changing the assumptions that generate their reactions. They want abundance while assuming scarcity is normal. They want connection while assuming abandonment is likely. They want freedom while assuming life requires constant struggle. These inner contradictions create friction, and friction feels like effort, confusion, and exhaustion. You cannot live from one assumption and receive results from another. Reality does not respond to preference. It responds to coherence. Whatever feels normal to you internally becomes the filter through which opportunities appear or disappear. This is not mystical. It is practical. People trust, invest in, hire, support, and align with those who are internally settled. Not perfect, but settled. When someone is settled inside themselves, their actions carry clarity instead of desperation. Notice how often your internal state is shaped by what has not happened yet. Waiting is one of the most underestimated emotional patterns. Waiting sounds passive, but it is actually very active internally. It trains your nervous system to stay alert, tense, and unsatisfied. When you live in waiting, you postpone peace. You tell yourself that calm will arrive later, confidence will arrive later, relief will arrive later. And later becomes a moving target that never quite lands. Being closer than you think requires ending the habit of postponement, not by forcing positivity, but by stopping the emotional delay. The most powerful shift you can make is allowing yourself to feel settled now, before circumstances justify it. This does not mean pretending everything's perfect. It means refusing to withhold stability from yourself as a bargaining chip. Here is a practical place to begin. Pay attention to how your body reacts when you think about what you want. Do you feel tightness, urgency, pressure, or contraction? Or do you feel openness, neutrality, or calm curiosity? The body never lies. It reveals the assumption underneath your desire. If your body tightens, the assumption is that what you want is hard to get, fragile, or conditional. If your body stays relaxed, the assumption is that life is cooperative. This is not about fixing your body. It is about listening to it. The moment you notice contraction, you are seeing the pattern that has been running your life quietly. Awareness alone begins to loosen it. You do not need to replace it with excitement. Excitement is unstable. Relief is far more powerful. Relief signals safety. Safety allows alignment. Another overlooked habit is the way you speak to yourself about time. Time pressure is one of the strongest reinforcers of lack. When you believe you are running out of time, you make decisions from fear instead of clarity. You compromise. You settle. You rush into things that do not fit, simply to escape the discomfort of waiting. This creates cycles that look like progress but feel hollow. The truth is that time responds to state, not effort. When you are internally settled, things unfold efficiently. When you are internally frantic, even simple tasks feel delayed. This is why some people seem to move quickly without strain, while others feel stuck despite constant effort. It is not about speed. It is about alignment. You are closer than you think because the distance has never been external. It has always been internal orientation. The moment you stop trying to force movement and begin stabilizing your inner state, life reorganizes around that stability, not instantly, not magically, but naturally. And natural movement lasts. Nothing here requires belief. It requires observation. The more honestly you observe yourself without judgment, the faster the old patterns lose their grip. You do not need to become someone new. You need to stop rehearsing who you no longer are. At this point, it becomes clear that progress has very little to do with effort and almost everything to do with orientation. The question is not how hard you are trying, but where you are trying from. Effort that comes from inner stability builds momentum. Effort that comes from inner lack creates resistance. From the outside, these two look identical. Both people may be taking action, learning, adjusting, showing up. Internally, they could not be more different. One is moving forward because it feels natural to do so. The other is moving forward because they're afraid not to. Fear-driven effort is subtle. It disguises itself as motivation. It says you need to stay alert, you need to keep improving. You need to stay ahead or you will fall behind. Over time, this creates a low-grade tension that never turns off. Even when something good happens, the relief is brief. The system does not register safety. It immediately looks for the next thing to fix. This is how people stay busy without feeling fulfilled. Being closer than you think means recognizing that nothing meaningful is blocked by your lack of effort. What is blocked is your ability to receive while remaining regulated. You can only move as fast as your nervous system feels safe to move. When safety is missing, your system will unconsciously slow things down, complicate decisions, and second-guess progress. Not to punish you, but to protect you. This is why forcing confidence rarely works. Confidence is not something you perform. It is something that emerges when your internal environment feels stable. Stability comes from consistency, not from outcomes. When you repeatedly choose grounded responses over reactive ones, your system begins to trust you. And when your system trusts you, clarity follows. Notice how often your internal dialogue is trying to get somewhere. Get to the next phase. Get to the breakthrough. Get to the moment where you can finally relax. That chasing energy keeps you oriented toward absence. It reinforces the idea that something essential is missing right now. And that assumption colors everything you touch. There's a quiet shift that changes this. You stop measuring yourself by distance and start measuring yourself by alignment. Instead of asking how far away you ask how present you are. Instead of asking what is missing, you ask what is already stable. This does not make you complacent. It makes you precise. Precision matters because energy follows attention. When your attention is scattered across fear, comparison, and urgency, your energy leaks. When your attention is anchored in the present moment, your energy consolidates. Consolidated energy moves things forward without strain. Here is something practical you can use immediately. Before taking any action related to what you want, pause and check your internal posture. Ask yourself whether this action is coming from clarity or pressure. If it is pressure, slow down. Not stop. Slow down. Take a breath. Let your body settle before moving. This one habit alone can change the quality of your results. Slowing down does not delay manifestation. It removes distortion. Many setbacks are not caused by wrong action, but by rushed action taken from an unstable state. When you move from calm, your decisions become cleaner. You notice things you would have missed. You speak differently, you listen more accurately. You choose better timing. Another pattern worth addressing is comparison. Comparison is not inherently bad. It becomes harmful when it is used to measure your worth or your pace. When you assume others are ahead and you are behind, your system enters threat mode. From that state, creativity shuts down. Learning becomes defensive. Growth becomes performative. Instead, treat comparison as data without judgment. If someone has what you want, that does not mean you are late. It means it is possible. Possibility expands when it is received calmly. Possibility contracts when it is received with envy or self-criticism. You are closer than you think because the path forward is not hidden. It is simply quiet. It does not shout. It does not pressure. It invites. When you stop trying to force alignment and start allowing it, movement becomes smoother, and smoother movement covers more ground than frantic effort ever could. The work here is not dramatic. It is subtle and consistent. It is choosing presence over projection, regulation over reaction, trust over urgency. Each of these choices shortens the distance you believe exists, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, life begins to meet you where you already are. At some point, you have to confront the idea that the distance you feel is not created by circumstances, but by interpretation. The mind has a habit of turning time into a problem. It takes something that is unfolding and labels it as delayed. It takes something that is forming and labels it as missing. This interpretation quietly trains your system to stay tense, as if something is wrong that needs to be corrected. But growth does not respond to tension. Growth responds to coherence. Coherence happens when your thoughts, emotions, and actions are aligned in the same direction. When they are not, effort increases, but progress slows. You can feel this internally. It feels like pushing against something invisible, like trying to swim forward while creating drag with your own movements. This is why chasing certainty never works. Certainty does not come from knowing how everything will unfold. It comes from knowing how you will relate to whatever unfolds. When you trust your ability to respond, adapt, and recalibrate, urgency dissolves. You no longer need guarantees. You move forward with steadiness instead of pressure. There's a pattern many people fall into without realizing it. They treat growth like a negotiation. If they improve enough, heal enough, learn enough, then life will finally reward them. This creates a conditional relationship with peace. Peace becomes something earned later instead of something practiced now. And anything postponed in this way continues to feel out of reach. The truth is that inner stability is not a prize at the end of progress. It is the ground progress grows from. When you cultivate steadiness now, everything built on top of it becomes more sustainable. When you postpone steadiness, even success feels fragile. Here is something practical to integrate. Pay attention to how often you mentally rehearse future relief. Phrases like, when this works out, once I get there, after this changes. Each one subtly trains your nervous system to remain dissatisfied in the present. Instead, practice locating small points of completion right now. Not forced gratitude, but recognition. A finished task, a clear decision, a calm moment. Let your system register completion instead of constant anticipation. Completion signals safety. Safety allows expansion. Expansion creates momentum. This is a cycle you can intentionally reinforce. Another key shift happens when you stop using struggle as proof of seriousness. There is a deep belief in many people that if it feels hard, it must be meaningful. If it feels easy, it must be shallow or temporary. This belief keeps people locked in effort long after effort is useful. Ease is not laziness. Ease is efficiency. Ease means fewer internal obstacles. When something begins to feel lighter, that is not a sign to distrust it. It is often a sign that alignment is increasing. Resistance decreasing does not mean growth has stopped. It means friction has been removed. Notice how often you override your own signals. You push past fatigue. You ignore intuitive pauses. You continue out of habit rather than clarity. Over time, this teaches your system that your needs will not be honored. Trust erodes. When trust erodes internally, external trust becomes harder to receive. Rebuilding this trust starts small. Keep the promises you make to yourself. Not grand declarations, but simple ones. Rest when you say you will rest. Stop when you say you will stop. Follow through on what feels true in the moment. Each time you do this, your system learns that you are safe to follow. Being closer than you think means you are not waiting for a breakthrough. You are refining your relationship with yourself. As that relationship stabilizes, your perception changes. What once felt distant begins to feel available. What once felt complicated begins to simplify, not because the world changed, but because your internal resistance decreased. This is not about passivity. It is about intelligent engagement. You still act. You still decide. You still move forward. But you do so without the internal narrative that something is wrong with where you are. And that single shift changes the quality of every step you take. As this settles, you may notice a subtle fear ashes, a fear that without pressure, you will stall, that without urgency, nothing will happen. This fear comes from old conditioning, not truth. Progress driven by fear is unstable. Progress driven by clarity compounds. When you begin to move from clarity, the path does not disappear. It becomes quieter. And in that quiet, you start to hear the next step without forcing it. There is a moment that arrives quietly, often overlooked, where effort turns into interference. Not because effort is wrong, but because it has overstayed its usefulness. When you continue applying force after alignment is already available, you create friction that did not need to exist. This is one of the hardest things to recognize, because effort feels responsible. Letting go can feel irresponsible, even when it is the most intelligent move. What actually happens when you stop overcorrecting is that your system recalibrates. The mind stops scanning for what is missing. The body releases tension it has been carrying in anticipation. Your perception widens. You begin to notice opportunities that were invisible when you were narrowly focused on fixing something. This is not mystical. It is neurological. A relaxed system processes more information accurately than a stressed one. This is why clarity often arrives after rest, not after pushing harder. It is why insights come in the shower, on a walk, or in moments when attention softens. When you stop demanding answers, the system has space to deliver them. Demanding narrows perception. Allowing expands it. There is also a subtle identity shift that occurs here. Many people unconsciously identify with striving. It becomes part of how they see themselves. The one who is always working on something, always improving, always chasing the next level. When this identity loosens, it can feel disorienting. You may wonder who you are without the chase. That discomfort is not a sign you are regressing. It is a sign you are reorganizing. Growth does not require constant tension to exist. In fact, sustained tension eventually produces burnout, not mastery. Mastery emerges when effort and rest are in balance, when action is paired with integration, when movement is followed by stillness long enough for learning to consolidate. Here is something grounded you can practice. Before taking action, ask a simple question. Is this coming from clarity or from urgency? Urgency feels tight. It rushes. It seeks relief. Clarity feels steady. It moves without panic. If the action feels urgent, pause. Even briefly, breathe. Let the urgency settle. Then decide again. Often the same action will remain, but it will be taken from a different internal state, and the result will change. Another practical shift involves how you interpret pauses. Pauses are not setbacks. They are integration points. When progress slows, your system is often reorganizing at a deeper level. If you interrupt this process by forcing movement, you prolong instability. If you allow it, momentum returns with less effort than before. This is where patience becomes active rather than passive. Active patience means staying present without collapsing into distraction. It means holding awareness without forcing outcomes. It is a skill, not a personality trait, and it strengthens with use. You may notice that as you stop forcing, emotions surface that were previously buried under activity. Restlessness, doubt, uncertainty. These are not signs you should return to overworking. They are signs that unresolved material is coming into awareness. Allowing these emotions to be felt without immediately fixing them builds internal resilience. Avoiding them keeps them in control. There is a deeper confidence that forms when you allow yourself to feel without being overwhelmed. You learn that discomfort is temporary, that uncertainty does not mean danger, that you can remain steady even when answers are not immediate. This confidence changes how you move through everything. As this confidence builds, something important happens. Your goals stop feeling like escape routes. They start feeling like expressions. You're no longer trying to become someone else to be okay. You are allowing what is already forming to unfold. The pressure drops, the timeline softens, and paradoxically, progress accelerates. Being closer than you think often means you are standing at the point where force is no longer required. But trust has not fully developed yet. That in-between space feels uncomfortable because it is unfamiliar. But it is also where things shift most quickly when you stop interfering. You do not need to abandon effort. You need to refine it. Effort guided by clarity builds. Effort driven by fear exhausts. Learning to tell the difference is one of the most valuable skills you can develop. At this stage, what usually gets in the way is not a lack of ability or opportunity, but a habit of mistrust toward your own timing. There is a deep conditioning that says if you are not actively pushing, you are falling behind. That belief keeps the nervous system in a constant state of readiness, always bracing for loss, always scanning for threats. And a system that is braced cannot receive clearly. When you are closer than you think, the next step often looks deceptively small. It is not dramatic. It does not feel like a breakthrough. It might look like maintaining a boundary you would have broken before, or choosing rest when you normally would have overridden your body, or saying no to something that pulls you back into urgency. These choices do not look impressive from the outside, but they radically change the internal conditions that determine what unfolds next. There is a quiet discipline required here, not the discipline of forcing yourself forward, but the discipline of staying aligned when nothing is demanding your attention. This is where many people slip back into old patterns. When things are calm, the mind looks for problems to solve. It creates urgency where none exists. Learning to remain steady and calm is a skill. Calm can feel unsafe if your system is used to chaos. One useful practice is to notice how often you try to anticipate the next obstacle. Anticipation masquerades as preparation, but it is often just anxiety in disguise. Preparation is grounded. Anticipation is tense. Preparation focuses on what is within reach right now. Anticipation lives in imagined futures that may never arrive. Each time you catch yourself rehearsing problems that have not appeared, gently return attention to what is actually present. Another important shift happens in how you relate to time. When you believe you are behind, every delay feels personal. When you trust that you are closer than you think, time becomes a collaborator instead of an enemy. You stop racing it. You start moving with it. This does not mean you stop taking action. It means your actions are no longer fueled by panic. You may also notice a change in how you respond to comparison. When you are close to alignment, other people's progress no longer triggers the same reaction. Instead of feeling threatened or diminished, you begin to see paths rather than competition. Comparison loses its emotional charge when you are no longer using it to measure your worth. This is a sign of internal stability forming. Stability does not mean certainty about outcomes. It means trust in your ability to adapt. It means knowing that whatever unfolds, you can meet it without collapsing or overcorrecting. That knowledge is powerful. It changes how opportunities show up and how you recognize them. If you want something practical to anchor this phase, simplify one area of your life deliberately. Reduce unnecessary commitments. Clear physical or digital clutter. Simplification sends a signal to your system that it does not need to stay on high alert. As external noise reduces, internal clarity increases. This is not about minimalism for its own sake. It is about reducing friction. As friction reduces, intuition becomes easier to hear. Not intuition as a dramatic voice, but as a quiet sense of direction, a subtle pull, a knowing without explanation. This guidance is often drowned out by constant analysis. When the system relaxes, it surfaces naturally. You are not waiting for something to arrive before you can trust yourself. You are building trust by how you respond right now. Each moment you choose steadiness over urgency, clarity over panic, presence over projection. You reinforce the state that allows things to move. Being closer than you think does not mean the path disappears. It means the struggle loosens. It means the next steps reveal themselves without force. And it means the version of you capable of receiving what you want is already forming through these choices. The work here is subtle but precise. It is not about doing more. It is about interfering less. What brings this all together is the realization that closeness is not measured by effort, but by alignment. You do not get nearer to what you want by straining toward it. You get nearer by becoming the kind of person who can hold it without losing themselves. That shift does not announce itself loudly. It shows up as steadiness, as fewer emotional swings, as less need to convince yourself or others that something is working. When you reach this point, you stop asking for signs, because your internal state has become the sign. There is a moment when chasing quietly turns into allowing, not because you gave up, but because you finally understood where your influence actually is. Influence is not in controlling outcomes. It is in shaping the inner conditions that determine how outcomes meet you. When your inner world is calmer, clearer, and more grounded, the outer world responds differently. Not magically, but predictably. People respond differently. Opportunities feel more natural. Decisions feel cleaner. Resistance dissolves without drama. You may notice that what once felt urgent now feels optional. That does not mean you stopped caring. It means you stopped equating urgency with importance. True importance has weight, not noise. It does not shout. It waits for you to be ready to receive it. And readiness is not about perfection. It is about capacity, emotional capacity, mental capacity, nervous system capacity. This is why nothing changed before and why things begin to change now. Before, there was effort without containment, desire without stability, movement without grounding. Now there is space. And space is where things land. Space is where clarity settles. Space is where the next step becomes obvious instead of overwhelming. If there's one thing to take from this, let it be this. You do not need to fix yourself to move forward. You need to stop fighting your own timing. The moment you stop arguing with where you are, momentum returns. Not because circumstances shift instantly, but because you stop leaking energy into resistance. That reclaimed energy reorganizes your experience. What you want is not far away. It is responding to who you are becoming. And who you are becoming is shaped by how you treat yourself when nothing is happening yet. That is where the real work has always been. That is where closeness is decided. You are not late. You are not missing anything. You are not behind. You are closer than you think because the distance was never external. It was always internal. And that distance is already closing.